Think about the last time you flew. You walked through a terminal your government built, through gates your country paid to maintain. Or so you thought. The airport you just pictured is probably owned by a private fund, not your government, not an airline, a fund, managed by people you have never heard of, in a country you may have never visited, collecting tolls on every takeoff, every landing, every coffee you bought before boarding. Airport privatization is one of the largest and most quietly executed transfers of public infrastructure in modern economic history. And most of the people passing through these terminals have no idea it happened. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to Britain in 1987. The British government was in the middle of the largest privatization program any Western country had attempted. British Telecom, British Gas, British Steel. One by one, state assets were packaged up and sold to private investors. And then, in 1987, they sold the airports. The British Airports Authority, which operated Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, and several others, was floated on the London Stock Exchange. It became BAA plc. The logic at the time was straightforward. Private capital would invest more aggressively than government budgets could. Competition would improve service, and the state would get cash up front. The British government sold BAA for approximately £1.2 billion. By the time the Spanish infrastructure giant Ferrovial acquired BAA in 2006, the company was valued at over £10 billion. The terminals were the same, the runways were the same, the passengers were the same. The profit now went somewhere different. Other governments watched, and then they did the same thing. Australia privatized its major airports in 1996. Germany privatized stakes in Frankfurt and Hamburg. France gave Aéroports de Paris a stock market listing. Italy, Portugal, Greece, New Zealand, Canada, India. The wave spread across every continent through the 1990s and 2000s. The model was simple. Grant a long-term concession, collect an upfront payment, walk away from the capital expenditure burden. Governments got cash today. Funds got guaranteed revenue for 30, 40, sometimes 99 years. So who ended up with all of it? The answer, across most of the world's major airports, is a surprisingly small number of infrastructure funds. Macquarie Infrastructure and Real Assets, based in Sydney, owns or operates airports across Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific. It owns stakes in Brussels Airport, Copenhagen Airport, and dozens more. Macquarie is not an airline company. It is a financial institution that manages money on behalf of pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and institutional investors. Ferrovial, the Spanish construction and infrastructure group, controls stakes in Heathrow, one of the busiest airports on Earth, and AGS airports in Scotland. Heathrow processes over 80 million passengers a year. Most of them have no idea a Spanish infrastructure conglomerate is one of its largest shareholders. Heathrow's shareholder structure is a useful illustration. Ferrovial holds around 25%. The Qatar Investment Authority holds around 20%. A Canadian pension fund, the university's superannuation scheme, and various other institutional investors hold the rest. The British government owns 0% of the country's flagship airport. It has not since 1987. This is not unique to Britain. Frankfurt Airport's operator Fraport is listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, with the state of Hesse holding a significant stake. But the airport also operates terminals in Lima, Antalya, Ljubljana, and Fortaleza under long-term concession contracts, extracting revenue from infrastructure built with public money in other countries. Vinci Airports, the French infrastructure group, operates over 70 airports across 12 countries. It runs the main international airports of Portugal, Japan, Serbia, Cambodia, Chile, and the Dominican Republic. One company, 12 countries, one set of shareholders. To understand why private funds love airports so much, you need to understand something most passengers never think about. Airlines pay to use airports, landing fees, gate fees, passenger charges. These are called aeronautical revenues. They are, in most privatized airports, tightly regulated by government. The airport cannot simply charge whatever it wants, but everything else is unregulated. The coffee shop, the duty-free, the parking lot, the hotel attached to the terminal, the office complex on the airport land, the advertising contracts on every digital display. These are called non-aeronautical revenues. And in most major airports today, non-aeronautical revenues exceed aeronautical revenues. At Heathrow, non-aeronautical revenues, retail, food, parking, real estate, make up over 50% of total income. The airport is, financially, as much a shopping center as it is a transport hub. The planes are what bring the customers. The shops are what generate the profit margin. Now layer on the structural advantage that makes airports uniquely attractive to private capital. You cannot build a competing airport next to Heathrow. You cannot open a rival terminal down the road from Frankfurt. The infrastructure is fixed, the land is scarce, and the regulatory process for new airport construction takes decades. A fund that owns an airport concession owns a captive market. Every passenger who needs to fly from that city passes through that terminal. There is no alternative. The queue is guaranteed. Infrastructure funds call this essential service monopoly. The asset generates steady, inflation-linked, long-term revenue. The competition risk is close to zero. And the government, in most cases, guaranteed the concession for long enough that even a recession barely interrupts the returns. Every airport in this video was built with public money, designed by public planners, permitted through public processes, paid for, in part, by the taxes of the people who use them, and then, in exchange for a check that covered a few years of government spending, the revenue from those assets was transferred. For decades, sometimes for a century, the deal was framed as modernization, as efficiency, as getting government out of the business of running airports. What it actually was is simpler. It was the sale of a guaranteed future income stream, priced at what the market would pay in the year of the sale, collected over the lifetime of every passenger who would ever fly through those gates afterward. The next time you pay €12 for a coffee at an airport and wonder where the money goes, the answer involves a pension fund in Toronto, a sovereign wealth fund in Doha, and an infrastructure manager in Sydney. The terminal is the same. The gate is the same. The owner is not who built it.